Dr. Lisa Rodriguez had always been the type of person who needed proof before believing anything. For the past 15 years, she worked as a scientist studying tiny organisms that might exist on other planets, while her friends joked about little green men and flying saucers. Lisa rolled her eyes and went back to her microscope. She worked at a research center in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by endless desert. Most people would find it boring, but Lisa loved the quiet. No city noise, no distractions, just her equipment, and the search for answers about life beyond Earth. On this particular evening in March, Lisa was doing what she did every Tuesday, checking her instruments and collecting samples. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. She had done this routine hundreds of times before. Check the readings, note the numbers, pack up her gear, and head back to the lab. But something was different tonight. Her electromagnetic detector started beeping in a way she had never heard before. The numbers on the screen were jumping around like crazy. Lisa frowned and tapped the device. Maybe it was broken? She had been using the same equipment for 3 years without any problems. The beeping got louder. The readings showed energy patterns. That made no sense according to everything she knew about science. Lisa felt her heart beat a little faster. As a scientist, weird readings usually meant one of two things. Either her equipment was broken, or she was about to discover something incredible. She followed the strongest signal readings, walking deeper into the desert than she usually went. The sand felt different under her feet, more compact somehow. Her flashlight beam danced across the ground as she searched for anything unusual. That's when she saw them. Perfect geometric shapes were carved into the sand. Not the kind of patterns wind could make. Not the tracks left by desert animals. These were precise, mathematical. Almost like someone had used a giant compass to draw perfect circles and triangles in the ground. Lisa knelt down and touched one of the lines. The sand felt warm, even though the desert night was getting cold. She pulled out her camera and started taking pictures from every angle. Whatever had made these patterns, it wasn't natural. As she worked, documenting everything like the good scientist she was, a sound filled the air. It was low and steady, like the hum of a massive machine, but softer somehow. Lisa looked up from her camera and felt her breath catch in her throat. Lights were moving across the sky. Not stars, not airplanes, not satellites. These lights moved with purpose, forming patterns that matched the shapes in the sand below. They pulsed with colors she had never seen before. Colors that seemed to exist somewhere between blue and silver, between green and gold. Lisa's scientific mind tried to find explanations. Weather balloons, military testing, some kind of atmospheric phenomenon she had never heard of. But deep down, she knew she was looking at something that challenged everything she thought she knew about the world. The lights descended slowly, gracefully, like leaves falling from an invisible tree. As they got closer, Lisa could see they weren't separate lights at all, but part of something larger, something that defied description. She thought about running. Every instinct told her to grab her equipment and get back to the safety of her Jeep. But her curiosity was stronger than her fear. This was what she had spent her entire career hoping to find, proof that life existed beyond Earth. The humming sound grew stronger, and Lisa felt it not just in her ears but in her chest. Like standing too close to massive speakers at a concert. The air around her seemed to shimmer, as if reality itself was bending. She fumbled for her phone to call her research partner back at the lab, but the screen showed no signal. Of course, she was miles from the nearest cell tower, alone in the desert with something that shouldn't exist. As the mysterious craft continued its descent, Lisa noticed that the geometric patterns in the sand were beginning to glow with the same impossible colors she saw in the sky. The lines pulsed in rhythm with the humming sound, as if the entire desert floor had become some kind of landing pad. Her hand shook as she continued taking pictures, though she wondered if her camera could even capture what she was seeing. This wasn't just about her research anymore. This was about everything humanity thought it knew about its place in the universe. The craft touched down with barely a whisper, so gently that Lisa wondered if it weighed anything at all. Up close, it was even more impossible. The surface seemed to shift between solid metal and flowing liquid, like mercury that had decided to hold its shape. Lisa stood frozen, her camera hanging forgotten in her hands. She was no longer just a scientist collecting data. She was a human being face to face with the unknown, and everything she thought she understood about reality was about to change forever. In that moment, suspended between terror and wonder, Lisa realized that some discoveries change not just what you know, but who you are. And she was about to become someone entirely different than the skeptical scientist who had walked into the desert just an hour ago. Lisa's mind raced as she stared at the impossible craft sitting silently in front of her. Every fiber of her being as a scientist told her to find a logical explanation. Maybe it was some kind of experimental military aircraft. Maybe she was having a hallucination caused by desert heat, even though the night air was cool against her skin. But then the craft began to change. What had appeared solid moments before now seemed to breathe like a living thing. The surface rippled with patterns of light that moved like waves across water. Lisa blinked hard, hoping her eyes were playing tricks on her. But the vision remained crystal clear. A soft whooshing sound filled the air, and an opening appeared in the side of the craft. Not a door opening with hinges or sliding panels, but more like the material itself was gently pulling apart to create a pathway. Light spilled out from inside, but it wasn't harsh like artificial lighting. It was warm and inviting, like sunlight filtered through morning clouds. Lisa took a step backward, her scientific curiosity battling with pure human instinct. Run or stay, document or flee. Her camera felt heavy in her hands as she realized she might be the first human being to witness something like this. Then she saw movement in the light. Figures began to emerge from the craft, and Lisa's breath caught in her throat. They were tall, much taller than any human, moving with a grace that seemed to defy gravity. Their bodies were slender and elegant, covered in what looked like flowing fabric that shimmered with the same impossible colors as their ship. 3 of them stepped onto the desert sand, and Lisa noticed that they left no footprints. They seemed to glide rather than walk, their movements so smooth and fluid that watching them felt like watching a dance. But it was their faces that made Lisa's heart pound, not because they were frightening, but because they were beautiful in a way that human language couldn't describe. Their features were delicate and symmetrical, with large eyes that held depths of intelligence and kindness. When they looked at her, Lisa felt like they could see straight into her soul. The strangest part was that she wasn't afraid anymore. Something about their presence filled her with a sense of calm she had never experienced. It was as if they were radiating peace itself. Then something extraordinary happened. Without opening their mouths, without making any sound at all, Lisa heard a voice in her mind, not her own internal voice, but something gentle and foreign, speaking in perfect English. Inside her thoughts, "Do not fear, Dr. Rodriguez. We have been watching your work for some time." Lisa nearly dropped her camera. How did they know her name? How were they speaking directly into her mind? She opened her mouth to ask these questions, but somehow she knew they had already heard her thoughts. "We observe those who seek truth about life beyond your world," the voice continued. "Your dedication to understanding has not gone unnoticed." More figures emerged from the craft. Lisa counted 7 in total, but one of them was different from the others. Where the first beings moved with grace, this one moved with authority. Where they radiated calm, this one emanated power. Even without understanding their culture or hierarchy, Lisa knew immediately that she was looking at their leader. This being was taller than the rest, with an aura that seemed to bend the very air around her. When she looked at Lisa, it felt like standing before something ancient and wise, something that had seen the birth and death of stars. The leader stepped forward, and when she spoke into Lisa's mind, her voice carried the weight of absolute command mixed with unexpected warmth. "You alone may enter, human." Lisa felt her knees go weak. Enter? Enter what? The craft. But why her? Why alone? As if reading her confusion, images began flashing through her mind. She saw herself working late into the night in her laboratory, passionate about her research when others had given up. She saw moments of wonder when she had discovered new microorganisms, treating each tiny life form with the respect it deserved. She saw herself standing up to colleagues who wanted to rush their findings to publication, insisting that truth was more important than fame. Somehow, these beings had been watching her all along. They had seen her character, her dedication, her genuine love for discovery and life itself. Just then, Lisa heard the distant sound of vehicles approaching. Her research team must have noticed she was missing when she failed to return at her scheduled time. Headlights appeared on the horizon, growing brighter as the jeeps raced across the desert toward her location. But something strange happened as her colleagues got closer. Their vehicles slowed, then stopped completely while still hundreds of yards away. Lisa could see her partner Tom climbing out of the lead jeep, but he seemed unable to come any closer. It was as if an invisible wall surrounded the area where Lisa stood with the beings. Through her binoculars, Lisa could see Tom and the others looking directly at the spot where she stood. But their expressions were blank and confused. They were seeing something, but not what she was seeing. To them, she must have appeared to be standing alone in the middle of empty desert. The leader's voice entered her mind again, gentle but insistent. They cannot perceive us as you do. This moment belongs to you alone. The question is, will you step forward into a larger understanding of your universe? Or will you remain where you are, safe in the limitations of what you thought you knew? Lisa looked back at her colleagues, then at the beings before her, then at the impossible craft that hummed with otherworldly energy. Everything she had ever believed about reality, about humanity's place in the cosmos, about the nature of existence itself, hung in the balance of this single decision. Her hands trembling, Lisa took her first step toward the craft, toward answers she had spent her entire life seeking, toward a truth that would change everything forever. Lisa's heart hammered against her ribs as she approached the opening in the craft. Each step felt like walking through thick honey, not because of any physical resistance, but because her mind was struggling to process what was happening. The scientist in her was screaming that this was impossible, while another part of her soul whispered that this was the moment she had been preparing for her entire life. The leader gestured gracefully toward the entrance, and Lisa noticed that her movements created tiny sparkles in the air, like disturbing invisible fairy dust. Everything about these beings seemed to exist on the edge between the physical world she knew and something far more magical. As Lisa reached the threshold, she paused and looked back one final time. Her colleagues stood frozen in the distance, their faces blank with confusion. Tom was holding his radio, probably trying to contact her, but she knew the signal wouldn't reach her anymore. She was crossing into a realm that operated by different rules. Taking a deep breath, Lisa stepped inside. The moment her foot touched the floor of the craft, reality shifted around her like water. The entrance sealed behind her without a sound, but instead of feeling trapped, she felt embraced. The interior was nothing like what she had expected from the outside, where the craft had appeared to be maybe 30 feet across from the outside. The space she now found herself in seemed to stretch endlessly in all directions. Curved walls flowed upward into a ceiling that looked like the night sky, complete with stars that twinkled and moved in slow, hypnotic patterns. How is this possible? Lisa whispered, her voice echoing strangely in the vast space. The leader's thoughts touched her mind gently. Your science understands that space and time can bend. We have simply learned to fold them more completely than your people have yet discovered. Lisa felt like Alice falling down the rabbit hole, except instead of falling, she was walking on solid ground that felt more real than any surface she had ever touched. The floor beneath her feet seemed to pulse with a gentle warmth, as if the entire ship was alive. The leader guided her through corridors that curved and twisted in impossible ways. Sometimes they walked on what Lisa thought was the floor, only to realize they were walking on what should have been the ceiling. Gravity seemed to be more of a suggestion than a law here. They passed through an archway into what could only be described as a garden. Though unlike any garden that existed on Earth, plants from countless worlds grew together in perfect harmony. Some looked almost familiar, like earth ferns and flowers, but others defied description. There were trees that seemed to be made of living crystal, their branches ringing like wind chimes when the air moved through them. Flowers that glowed with their own inner light painted the air with colors that Lisa had no names for. "This is beautiful," Lisa breathed, reaching out to touch a vine that sparkled like it was covered in diamonds. "Each world we visit teaches us something new about life," the leader explained through their mental connection. "We collect not specimens, but knowledge, understanding. We learn from every form of life we encounter, and we share that wisdom with others who are ready to receive it." They moved deeper into the ship, passing through spaces that served purposes Lisa could barely begin to understand. She saw rooms filled with floating spheres of light that pulsed in rhythm with each other, like a three-dimensional symphony she could see instead of hear. Another chamber contained what looked like living books, their pages turning themselves as information flowed across them in scripts from 1,000 different worlds. But it was the next room that took Lisa's breath away completely. The walls were transparent, offering a view of space that was more vivid and real than any telescope could provide. But this wasn't just a window. As Lisa watched, the view shifted and moved, showing her planet after planet, star system after star system, worlds covered in purple oceans under twin suns, cities of glass and light that stretched across entire continents, beings of every imaginable shape and size going about their daily lives on planets so far away that their light hadn't even reached Earth yet. "This is the universe as it truly is," the leader said, her mental voice filled with something that might have been pride mixed with deep affection. "Not the empty, lifeless void your people imagine, but a garden teeming with consciousness and wonder." Lisa pressed her hands against the transparent wall, tears streaming down her face without her realizing it. All her life, she had wondered if humanity was alone in the universe. Now she was seeing proof that they were part of something so vast and magnificent that her mind could barely grasp it. "Why are you showing me this?" Lisa asked, her voice barely a whisper. The leader moved to stand beside her, and for the first time, Lisa felt the being's presence not just in her mind but as a warm, comforting energy next to her. "Because your world stands at a crossroads," came the gentle reply. "Your people have reached a level of development where they must choose their path forward. They can continue to believe they are alone, isolated, and afraid, fighting each other for resources they think are scarce. Or they can begin to understand that they are part of a community that spans the stars, where knowledge and wisdom are shared freely among all who are ready to receive them." The view outside the window shifted again, and now Lisa was looking at Earth, but not the Earth she knew from satellite photos. This Earth pulsed with networks of light that connected every living thing, from the smallest bacteria to the largest whale. She could see the web of consciousness that linked all life on her planet, and she realized that humanity was just beginning to awaken to its place in this cosmic tapestry. "Your people have great potential," the leader continued, "but they also have great capacity for both creation and destruction. We watch young civilizations carefully, waiting for individuals who can help guide their species toward wisdom rather than chaos." Lisa turned to look at the being beside her, understanding flooding through her like warm honey. "You're choosing ambassadors," she said, "people who can help prepare humanity for contact." The leader's thoughts carried what Lisa could only describe as a smile. "We are gardeners, Dr. Rodriguez. We plant seeds of understanding in fertile minds, and we tend them carefully until they are ready to bloom. You have spent your life seeking truth about life beyond your world. Now you must decide if you are ready to carry that truth back to your people." As Lisa stood in that impossible ship, surrounded by wonders beyond imagination, she realized that her life as she had known it was over. She could never go back to being the person who had walked into the desert that evening. The question now was, what kind of person would she become? Lisa felt like she had been inside the craft for hours, maybe even days. Time seemed to flow differently in that impossible space, stretching and bending like everything else aboard the ship. She had seen wonders that would take lifetimes to fully understand, and her mind was buzzing with questions and revelations. But then the leader's voice touched her thoughts one final time. "It is time for you to return, Dr. Rodriguez, your colleagues are growing concerned, and you have much to process from what you have experienced tonight. Lisa wanted to protest. She had so many questions still unanswered. How did their technology work? What other civilizations existed out there? How long had they been watching Earth? But somehow she understood that this first meeting was just the beginning, not the end. The leader guided her back through the winding corridors of the ship. As they walked, Lisa noticed that her memory of everything she had seen remained crystal clear, as if each moment had been perfectly preserved in her mind like photographs that would never fade. You will remember everything, the leader confirmed, reading her thoughts. We have ensured that this knowledge will remain with you, but we have also given you the wisdom to know how and when to share it. They reached the entrance, and Lisa could see the desert night waiting beyond the soft glow of light. For a moment, she hesitated. Stepping back outside meant returning to a world where everything she had just experienced would sound like madness to anyone she tried to tell. How can I go back to my normal life after this? Lisa asked, her voice small and uncertain. The leader placed a gentle hand on Lisa's shoulder, and warmth flooded through her entire body. You cannot, came the honest reply. But that is not a loss, Dr. Rodriguez. That is growth. You are no longer the same person who entered our ship tonight. You are becoming who you were always meant to be. Lisa stepped out of the craft and onto the familiar sand of the desert. The moment her feet touched the ground, she heard the soft whooshing sound again as the entrance sealed behind her. She turned around. But the ship was already beginning to fade, becoming translucent like morning. Mist within seconds, it was gone completely, leaving no trace that it had ever been there. Even the geometric patterns in the sand had vanished, leaving only smooth, undisturbed ground. Lisa stood alone in the darkness, her heart pounding as the magnitude of what had just happened hit her. Had it been real? Had she imagined the entire thing? But even as doubt tried to creep into her mind, she knew with absolute certainty that every moment had been as real as the sand beneath her feet. In the distance, she could see flashlight beams moving toward her. Her colleagues had finally been able to approach now that the invisible barrier was gone. She could hear Tom calling her name, his voice filled with worry and relief. Lisa, there you are. We've been looking everywhere for you. Tom reached her first, slightly out of breath from running across the desert sand. Behind him came the rest of her research team, all talking at once with questions and concerns. Where have you been? Asked Dr. Williams, her senior research partner. We saw you on the thermal scanner, standing right here, but when we tried to get closer, our vehicles just stopped working. The engines died, the radios went dead. It was the strangest thing. Lisa looked at their confused faces and realized the impossible position she was now in. To them, she had simply vanished for about 20 minutes while examining some unusual energy readings. They had no memory of seeing the craft, no awareness of the beings who had visited. It was as if she had experienced something that existed in a completely different layer of reality. And I'm not sure, Lisa said carefully, testing the words. I was following some strange electromagnetic readings, and I must have lost track of time. My equipment was acting up. It wasn't exactly a lie, but it wasn't the truth either. How could she tell them that she had just toured a spacecraft from another world, that she had seen gardens full of alien plants, and windows showing the entire universe teeming with life? They would think she had suffered heat stroke or a mental breakdown. As they walked back to the vehicles, Tom kept glancing at her with concern. Are you sure you're okay? You seem different somehow, like something important happened out there. Lisa managed a weak smile. Just tired, I guess. It's been a long day. But Tom was right. Something had changed in her, something fundamental and impossible to hide completely. She could feel knowledge burning inside her mind like a gentle fire, information and insights that would revolutionize human understanding of the universe. Yet she also carried the terrible responsibility of knowing when and how to share these truths. Over the following days, Lisa tried to return to her normal routine. She went to her lab, analyzed samples, wrote reports, attended meetings. But everything felt different now. when colleagues discussed the possibility of life on other planets. She had to bite her tongue to keep from telling them about the incredible diversity she had witnessed. When they debated whether intelligent aliens might exist, she wanted to describe the wisdom and kindness she had encountered. Most difficult of all were the moments when she caught herself staring at the night sky, knowing that somewhere among those stars were countless worlds filled with beings who had achieved things humanity could barely imagine. She was no longer looking up at empty space, but at a neighborhood she had barely begun to explore. Lisa began to notice subtle changes in her research. Ideas came to her more easily now. Insights that seemed derived from nowhere but led to genuine breakthroughs. Her papers on consciousness in microorganisms gained attention in scientific journals. Her theories about energy fields and living systems opened new avenues of research. She was careful to present everything as natural scientific progression, building on existing knowledge rather than making impossible leaps. But she knew that each discovery was a small gift from her encounter, a way of gradually preparing humanity for larger truths. 3 months after that night in the desert, Lisa was working late in her lab when she felt a familiar presence touch her mind. Not words this time, just a gentle reminder that she was not alone, that her work was seen and appreciated by those who watched from afar. She walked to her lab window and looked up at the stars, understanding finally that her real work was just beginning. She was no longer just a scientist studying the possibility of life beyond Earth. She had become a bridge between worlds, carrying the awesome responsibility of helping humanity take its next step into the larger universe. The hardest part wasn't keeping the secret. The hardest part was learning to live with the knowledge that everything was about to change. And she was one of the few people on Earth who knew it was coming. 6 months had passed since that life-changing night in the desert, and Lisa was learning to live between two worlds. During the day, she was Dr. Rodriguez, respected scientist and researcher. But at night, when she looked up at the stars, she was something else entirely, a guardian of humanity's future, carrying secrets that could reshape civilization itself. The loneliness was sometimes overwhelming. There were moments when she desperately wanted to share what she had experienced with someone, anyone who might understand. But every time she considered it, she remembered the leader's gentle warning about timing and wisdom. Then something unexpected began to happen. It started with small things. A colleague at another university published a paper about energy fields in plants that seemed to echo ideas Lisa had been developing. An artist in New York created a sculpture series called Cosmic Gardens that looked remarkably similar to what Lisa had seen aboard the ship. A physicist in Japan announced a breakthrough in understanding how space and time could be folded. That matched perfectly with technology she had witnessed. At first, Lisa thought these were just coincidences. But as weeks turned to months, the pattern became impossible to ignore. Other people were having experiences, insights, and inspirations that seemed to come from the same source as her own knowledge. Lisa realized she wasn't alone after all. The confirmation came on a Tuesday evening when she received an unexpected email from Dr. Chen Wei, a consciousness researcher from Beijing. The message was simple but loaded with meaning. Dr. Rodriguez, I believe we may have had similar experiences recently. I would very much like to discuss gardens among the stars with someone who might understand. Would you be available for a video call this weekend? Lisa's hands trembled as she read the message. Gardens among the stars. No one could have chosen those exact words by accident. Dr. Chen had been chosen too. Their first conversation lasted 6 hours, speaking in carefully coded language at first, then with growing excitement as they realized they could trust each other. Lisa and Dr. Chen compared their experiences. Chen had encountered the beings 3 months after Lisa, while studying meditation and consciousness at a remote monastery in Tibet. I thought I was going crazy, Chen admitted, his eyes bright with relief at finally having someone to talk to. But the knowledge they shared, it's been transforming my research in ways I never imagined possible. Over the following weeks, Lisa and Chen began to identify others. A marine biologist in Australia who had started making breakthrough discoveries about underwater ecosystems after a strange encounter while diving. a teacher in Brazil whose students suddenly began showing remarkable insights about interconnectedness and cooperation, an engineer in Germany whose designs for clean energy seemed to come from knowledge beyond current human understanding. They were careful, always careful. They communicated through academic discussions and research collaborations, never directly mentioning their experiences, but always recognizing each other through subtle signs and shared understanding. Lisa began to see the bigger picture. The beings weren't just selecting random individuals. They were choosing people in positions to influence and guide human development. Scientists who could introduce new concepts gradually. Educators who could plant seeds of cosmic awareness in young minds. Artists who could help humanity imagine possibilities beyond their current limitations. One evening, while working late in her lab, Lisa felt that familiar presence touch her mind again. This time, the communication was clearer and more detailed than ever before. "You have done well, Dr. Rodriguez. You and the others we have chosen are helping your species prepare for what is to come." Lisa set down her microscope and looked out the window at the star-filled sky. "What exactly is coming?" she asked, speaking aloud to the empty lab. Images flowed through her mind. She saw humanity 20 years in the future, working alongside beings from other worlds to solve problems that seemed impossible today. Climate change reversed through technologies that worked with natural systems rather than against them. Diseases conquered through understanding of consciousness and energy that current medicine couldn't grasp. Conflicts ended as people began to understand their deep connection to all life. But she also saw alternative futures, paths where fear and violence led humanity toward isolation and eventual destruction. The choice, she understood, was still being made every day by billions of individual decisions and actions. "Your role is not to force this change," the presence explained. "It is to make it possible, to plant seeds of wisdom that will grow when your people are ready to accept them." Lisa nodded, understanding flooding through her. She and the others weren't meant to announce themselves as cosmic ambassadors or prove their experiences to the world. They were meant to be subtle influences, helping humanity evolve its thinking and consciousness gradually, naturally. "When will open contact happen?" Lisa asked. "When your species demonstrates that it can handle such knowledge responsibly. When fear no longer dominates your responses to the unknown. When you understand that you are part of something larger than yourselves." The presence began to fade, but not before leaving Lisa with one final understanding. The work she and the others were doing wasn't just about preparing for eventual contact with other civilizations. It was about helping humanity become worthy of that contact, wise enough, compassionate enough, and mature enough to join the galactic community as responsible members, rather than destructive children. As months turned to years, Lisa watched the slow but steady changes happening around the world. More people seemed to be awakening to ideas about consciousness, interconnectedness, and humanity's place in the larger universe. The network of chosen individuals continued to grow, always working quietly, always planting seeds. Lisa knew she might never live to see open contact happen. This work could take generations, but she also knew that every day, through her research, her careful sharing of insights, and her quiet influence on colleagues and students, she was helping to bend the arc of human development towards something magnificent. On quiet nights, when she stood in the desert where it all began, Lisa could feel the presence of countless beings across the galaxy who were watching humanity's progress with hope and patience. She was no longer the skeptical scientist who had walked into the desert that first night. She had become something far more important, a gardener of consciousness, helping to nurture humanity toward its cosmic destiny. The greatest discovery of her life hadn't been proof that aliens existed. It had been learning that humans were capable of becoming something worthy of meeting them as equals among the stars.